Chapter 21, The Heist Part 2. Hiding in the sarcophagus, they could hear somebody cleaning up Yoyogi's spill. It seemed to take an awful long time, but finally they heard the sound of the mop being dropped into a pail and then heavy footsteps leaving the room. After waiting an additional 3 minutes to be safe, Yoyogi stuck his head out and gave the all clear. With sand pouring off their clothes, they climbed out of the sarcophagus and glanced nervously around Dr. Moon's chamber and out into the exhibit area beyond. They knew they were being filmed, so they covered their faces with their hands and made their way out of the chamber. Anybody watching the video later would likely recognize them, but they hoped that their disguises and covered faces might possibly deny they were there. The stairs leading down to the restoration room were only a few dozen feet away, but it felt like they were crossing a football field, perhaps more aptly a graveyard. They could almost feel the mummy's eyes on them as they passed. Twice they heard voices coming out from parts of the museum, but they made it through without being interrupted by anybody, dead or alive. They stopped at the bottom of the stairwell where there was a door marked Employees Only. When they'd passed through it, they'd practically been employees themselves, accompanied by a senior curator of the museum. This time they approached the door, they considerably more trepidation. Now they were thieves in the midst of a heist, even if the only thing they planned to steal was the severed finger, which they meant to return soon. Above the door handle was a keypad-style lock. Albert 3D had explained that the 5-letter pass code changed weekly, or when I can remember to change it, he told them with a self-deprecating smile. Rather than informing the other staff members every time he changed the code, he always left clues on the door. It was a sort of game. A twig, for example, might mean the code was stick, or a piece of tape might mean stuck. Then again, I suppose it meant stick, too, in the sense of sticky. Today, the 2 images were passed above the lock. The first was an image of an Egyptian tomb painting, a falcon-headed man standing under a large disc. The second was a child sticker, a cartoon image of a school bus. Cass looked at Max Ernest. Well, there's no question that figuring out the passcode was his department. The question her tone conveyed was whether he could figure it out before they were caught red-handed by the security guard. The first one is easy, said Max Ernest. That's the sun god, Ra. You can tell by the disc over his head it represents the sun. I'm not sure what the school bus means. Maybe just school, which would give you Ra school as a clue. What about rascal? Asked Yoji, like the word. Max Ernest shook his head. It has to be 5 letters, remember? That's 6. But Ra bus, then? Suggested Cass. Doubt it. Too random, said Max Ernest. He tried the word anyway. The light remained red. Cass was bouncing on her feet in impatience. So what about it then? I don't know. Just give me an... Oh no. Max Ernest turning pale. It can't be. What? Tell us already, said Cass. Yeah, about you're scaring us, man, said Yoji. Not rob us, said Max Ernest, said slowly. Rob us. They looked at one another. The implication was scarier than they expected. No way, said Yoji. How would he know? His hand shaking slightly, Max Ernest tried the password. It didn't work. They all exhaled in relief. The robbery wasn't anticipated after all. We still have to get in, said Cass. If we stand here forever. I know. Let me think, said Max Ernest. Without the disc at the top, the god would be called Horus. But I don't think that helps. Maybe Ra is spelled R-E with an E? Rebus, maybe? Does Re stand for any kind of bus? Asked Yoji. You know, like the name of the bus line? No, but you just got it anyway, said Max Ernest. He's starting to giggle. Rebus. I can't believe I didn't think of it right away. It's hilarious. His friends looked quizzically, but now Max Ernest was about to fall down laughing. Don't you get it? Rebus is rebus. They shook their heads. They didn't get it, and they didn't get him either. A rebus is a kind of code in which picture of word equals sound, like raw and bus for raw bus. Even though it wasn't right, or like if you saw a drawing of an eye, it could mean eye to see with, but it could also mean the sound of the word. You know how people will draw an eye and then a heart and with the letter U? It means I love you? Cass made a face. Gross. Max Ernest blushed. I wasn't saying. Cass laughed. I know. Aren't I ever allowed to make a joke? Oh, I mean, yes, Max Ernest relieved. Anyways, I figure out that Albert 3D would be into robust because the hieroglyphs work like that, with the pictures for sounds. Come on, let's go snag the mummy's finger and then bail, said Yoji, looking over her shoulder to make sure they were still alone. This is getting robustulous, finished Max Ernst, cracking himself up again. He punched the word into the keypad and the light turned green. They made it all the way to the restoration room without hearing or seeing anybody aside from the swollen and stuffed assembled residents of the osteology and taxidermy room. Of course, they'd been hoping not to meet anybody, but there was something eerie about it nonetheless. Feel like at any second people are going to jump out and yell surprise, said Cass. Yeah, only instead of singing happy birthday, they're going to arrest us, said Max Ernest. Way to think positive, said Yoji. Look, it's right there, everything's cooperated. He pointed to the shelf, and the shoebox in which Albert 3D kept the mummy's finger was exactly where they'd remember it being placed, between the urns. Using the bottom shelf as a step, Cass reached up and took it down. All three of them looked inside simultaneously, and simultaneously their faces fell. What the? Exclaimed Yoji. Is that what I think it is? Asked Max Ernest. Uh-huh, said Cass bleakly. There was something lying in the linens inside the box, but it wasn't the mummy's finger. It wasn't anybody's finger. It was a gold-framed monocle, the double monocle, the monocle the Lord Pharaoh had taken from Cass when they tussled months earlier. Somebody, no doubt Lord Pharaoh, had removed the mummy's finger from the box and left the monocle in the finger's place. He's sending us a message, said Yoji. Yeah, and he's the one step ahead of us, said Max Ernest, watching us, said Cass, looking over her shoulder. Remembering the unique powers of the monocle, Cass put it to her eye and looked around the room. With the monocle, she could see around corners and even through a few walls. But she didn't see Lord Pharaoh or any other ghosts, only Albert 3D entering through the employee exit. Come on, we gotta go, she whispered, replacing the shoebox on the shelf minus the monocle. Albert's coming. It was a lucky break she tried the monocle when she did. One more minute and Albert 3D would have caught them, with the shoebox in their hand. But where to go? They'd been planning on leaving through the employee exit, but if they went that way, they would run directly into him. Back that way, Cass pointed to the door of the osteological and taxidermy room. Trying not to make any noise, they raced out of the restoration room just before Albert 3D entered it. They could hear him following behind them, speaking to a colleague. We're just going to have to set up in Vegas as planned and hope that we get the mummy back. The Curio Hotel is not going to be happy, but what else can we do? At last, the footsteps didn't stop. Albert 3D was heading in their direction. Upstairs, said Yoji. The others nodded. They had no choice. When they got to the top of the stairs, the door below started to open. There was no time to get out of the exhibit area before Albert 3D entered it. Quick, the sarcophagus, whispered Cass. No, that's probably where they're going, whispered Yoji. What about those crates in there? He nodded in the direction of the packed-up animal mummies. As fast as they could, they ran to the crates. The crates were various sizes, with stenciled arrows and warnings on their sides. The biggest was roughly the size of a refrigerator. Its back was open and the crate was more than a half full, but there would be just enough space for them if they squeezed. They crawled inside. Yoji closed the hinges door just before they heard the footsteps in the next room. In their haste, they failed to notice they weren't alone.